what up, it's your boy Dragon, and today is going to be part 2 of the Dracolich problem video, and in this video I'm going to go over range tiers, and I'm going to talk about why they suck, and a pretty good option to fix them. So, let's get into it. So, as you can see on the screen, I have the range equipment tier correction table that I made, where I take the tier at tier 95 and go all the way down to tier 70, talk about both power and tank armor, and, each one implies that we're going to fill the slot on each of them, and we're going to do that. So, if you watched my previous video, you saw me talk about the tier 90 and above sets. So, main thing is Elite Sirenic and Sirenic stay where they're at with tier 92 and tier 90. And then Dracolich does a sidestep from power gear to tank gear and maintains its set effect. So it'd be unique in the fact that it is the only tank armor with an offensive set effect. But then when you combine it with the Elite Sirenic components, you get Elite Dracolich, which would be tier 95 power armor. And tier 95 power armor has the same defensive rating as tier 90 tank armor. So logically, this all makes sense here, but maybe not to JX. And of course, moving Tempest to a tier 92 tank armor set, and Active Tempest to a tier 95. So in my next video, I'm going to talk about the rates refresh, and that's the main point, so I'm going to cover everything there. But essentially, we want to look at adding a set effect to Tempest, and making these two sets both augmentable now, and non-degradable to dust at least. So I'll talk about that in the next video though. Before we get too far into the Tempest, I'm going to cut it off there, and we're going to move on to the tier 87 and tier 85 gear, which would be the Refined Animal Core and Animal Core. I think it's, pretty strange that they decided to make this, again, an overlapping gear set when it came out, so I thought it was pretty lame that they made it the same level as Pernix. Now, when you upgrade the gear set as well, it's not a permanent thing, so that's another change I would make. So essentially, Refined Animal Core would be a permanent gear set that you could just repair with essences or something like that. I don't really know, but it seems kind of insane that easier to obtain gear sets are, available and higher power than this, and that would be a specific example of Superior Morgans. So I'll have that coming up here shortly, but this is one of the main things that I've always had a gripe with the second release of the God Wars, is that it should have been more powerful gear than what it was, and bridging the gap on Sirenic and Tectonic, but it never did. So this is a good compromise to fix it up and make it so it's a better gear set. Now for the power, that's covered, but the tank gear, Death Lotus tier 85, which it already is, so that's fine, but Superior Death Lotus would get a slight bump up to tier 87. So this would make it somewhat more valuable, and again, the next best tank sets, but the reason for this is, it takes so long to get this gear set, it's ridiculous. You have to do ports for over a year just to be able to unlock these kind of sets, and then to actually obtain the materials to use them. I think ports could use a refresh too, but I didn't necessarily want to make a video about that in this particular series, so that could be another part, but I've decided to skip it. So instead of getting sidetracked with the obvious ports rework that just needs to be done as well, we're going to move on to Superior Morgans and Morgans. So this follows the same kind of upgrade path that Dracolich and Elite Dracolich does. So this is a 5-tier gap difference, which means Morgan's original gear would be tank armor, and then when you make it superior, it would go to DPS or power armor. So this would be at the 82 spot. So I think it's a good compromise. This allows it to be upgraded similar to, again, Dracolich, and it kind of makes the numbers make sense from the armor rating that it would have after it gets the DPS bonus. So I think it's a good compromise and a good change, and Morgan's is a lot easier to obtain than it is for Animal Core, Refined Animal Core, Superior Death Lotus, or Death Lotus. So I think, to me, this is a good compromise where it still maintains some of its value because it would be tier 82, but it's not going to be valuable, and to be honest, it's not really that valuable at all, but it'd just be another gear set option. Now the next gear sets are pretty obvious. Pernix is going to maintain its tier 88 power gear stat, and then Undead Dragonhide would be moved up from tier 70 up to, tier 75 up to tier 80. So there's already a tier 75 set, which is Dinosaur Hide, so why would you just overlap it with a better gear set, which is Undead Dragonhide, which also has a higher HP boost for no reason. So I always thought this didn't make sense, and if you put it at tier 80, when you upgrade it to Dracolich, it makes sense. It's a 10 level gap, and then when you add the power armor to Elite Dracolich, that's a 5 level gap because it changes from tank to power armor. So I think this is a better compromise than what it's currently at. So moving on to the next set though, this one is the only unique one, that's why it has a star next to it, Elite Robin Hood set. So the set itself is going to be classified as a tier 77 armor, but it's a little bit different. It's going to have, the Vestments of Havoc effect, if you will. So it's going to have tier 85 damage, but tier 70 defense. So if you look at the gear set, logically this makes sense because the gear set itself has 0 armor. So if you're looking at it, that's not going to allow you to tank any damage. But then adding tier 85 damage to it kind of gives it that, initial power spike. So it's actually higher than what it is now. But obviously with no defense, you're going to be getting hit a lot more. So that's kind of the trade-off, and I think it's kind of a new way to add something like that, similar to the Vestments of Havoc, to the range table rather than just melee. So I think it would be cool, and I think it would help maintain some of the value. And now we're going to cover the last gear sets. So pretty obviously, Armadillo should have been moved up to tier 75 power armor at release because all the weapons for God of War's dungeon originally were tier 75. So to me, it didn't make sense why the armor wasn't tier 75. So you would just move Armadillo up to tier 75 power armor, which not a big jump, but definitely a difference. And then you would actually move Carol from tank armor to power armor. I never understood why a boss dropped tank armor, even though they have the set effects and stuff. It'd be pretty unique to just have them as the best in slot tier 70 for at the time, I guess. It doesn't make sense to me why you wouldn't just, you know, move all the barrel sets to power armor. So this would be the first step, moving them all to tier 70 power armor. And then of course on the tank side, that's going to remain Dinosaur Hide at tier 75, but then it's going to move Royal Dragon Hide up to tier 70 tank armor. I don't think it necessarily needs to be augmentable, so I would just say skip it. It doesn't need to be augmentable, even though it's, you know, at the tier 70, which is kind of like the base requirement. But it's just another thing to add on here, so that way it fills the gap slot. And then 72 is one, but tier 82 I would say you could add something more to, but tier 72, skip it entirely. There's no reason to add these half tiers, or these, you know, 2.5 level tiers for any of these gear sets, so I would just skip it entirely and leave it as is. Now, tier 65, you could just move Blessed D-Hide up to that to cover the Royal Dragon Hide slot, which makes sense because it is a clue reward, so it's a little harder to get than your basic Black D-Hide or something like that. So I think if you do that, that kind of fixes all the level gaps for range, and it would make it suck less. So that's the main point of this video, just some stuff that I want to talk about, where I think there was a huge imbalance. Dracolich, but once you start looking at all the gear sets, how difficult they are to obtain and how good they are, it kind of doesn't make sense here. So this is my compromise, and top down, tier 95 to tier 70. So we covered the range equipment issue, and yeah, so the next video is going to cover two specific sets out of that, which is the Tempest and Acto Tempest sets. So I want to do a video on Raids Refresh as the part 3 because I think it's a problem that, you know, these tank sets are irrelevant now, especially when you have Dracolich move over to the tier 90 tank gear slot. So we're going to cover that as part 3 in the next video, so that is going to be the Raids Refresh. So if you like this video, like, subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.